Guys, don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your friends and family. Also, let me know where you're watching from. I woke up to the sound of my alarm blaring in my ears. Groggy and half asleep, I fumbled for my phone on the nightstand, squinting at the bright screen. It was 6:30 a.m. Time to get up and get ready for work. Like every morning, I wasn't quite ready to leave the comfort of my bed, so I did what I always did. Instead of heading straight to the bathroom, I opened my camera app. It was just a small habit of mine. I like to check my face for any new pimples or dark circles before getting up. But this time, something was different. As soon as the app opened, I noticed something unusual in the bottom corner of the screen. A video thumbnail. I blinked. I didn't remember recording anything. My heart rate picked up slightly, but I brushed it off. Maybe I had accidentally hit the record button without realizing it. That had happened before. Still, curiosity gnawed at me. I tapped the thumbnail to play the video. The screen flickered, and the video started. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. The footage was dim, bathed in the soft glow of my bedside lamp. The angle was odd, as if someone had propped my phone up on a surface. I could see my bed, my pillow. Mr. I was in the video. I was lying there asleep, my chest rising and falling steadily. And then, a shadow moved. My breath caught my throat. Someone, a person, was in the room. I gripped my phone tighter, my skin turning cold. The figure stepped closer to the bed, moving slowly, carefully, as if trying not to wake me. The camera angle shifted slightly, and I could see their silhouette more clearly. They were standing right next to me, watching me. My entire body went rigid. The figure leaned over me, their head tilting slightly as if studying my face. My sleeping form didn't react. I had no idea this was happening. Then, just as slowly as they had approached, the person straightened up and walked away. The video ended. I sat frozen, my heart hammering so loudly I could hear it in my ears. My stomach twisted. I played the video again, and again. It didn't change. It wasn't some weird glitch. This was real. Someone had been in my room while I was asleep. Someone had stood inches away from me, watching me breathe, and I hadn't woken up. I struggled to think, to make sense of it. How? How could this have happened? My apartment wasn't big, just a small one-bedroom. If someone had broken in, I should have heard something. I wasn't even a deep sleeper. A wave of nausea hit me as a terrifying thought crept into my mind. What if they had been here before? My hands shook as I checked my apartment. I moved quickly, yanking open closet doors, checking under the bed, even looking behind the shower curtain. Every room was empty. There were no signs of forced entry, no open windows, no missing items. Nothing was out of place. I felt like I was losing my mind. Someone had been in my home, but they hadn't stolen anything. They had just recorded me sleeping and left. But why? I grabbed my phone again, desperate for some kind of explanation. Maybe I had recorded it by accident. Maybe it was just a weird trick of the light. Maybe the video wasn't recorded on my phone. I stared at the screen. My pulse pounded in my ears. The file details showed that the video hadn't been created by my phone's camera. It had been airdropped to me, which meant whoever filmed it had been close enough to send it. My breath came out in short gasps as dread pooled in my stomach. I whipped my head around, scanning the room as if the intruder was still hiding somewhere. I didn't know what to do. Should I call the police? But what would I even say? Nothing was stolen. There was no break-in, no fingerprints, just a video that someone sent me. Would they even take me seriously? I spent the entire day in a fog of paranoia. I jumped at every sound, every creak of the floor, every whisper of wind outside my window. My mind kept replaying the video over and over again, analyzing every detail, trying to make sense of it. One thought wouldn't leave me alone. What if they weren't done? That night I locked my door. Then I double-checked it. Then I shoved a chair under the doorknob just in case. I even checked the windows twice before finally climbing into bed. I kept my phone in my hand, my fingers gripping it tightly, as if that would somehow keep me safe. Sleep didn't come easy. Every little noise made my skin prickle. The silence felt heavy, like the air was pressing down on me. I pulled the blanket up to my chin and forced my eyes shut. Eventually, exhaustion won. I don't know how long I was asleep before I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing softly. My heart pounded as I fumbled for it, my fingers stiff with fear. My screen lit up. One new airdrop received. My throat went dry. I stared at the notification, my pulse hammering against my ribs. Slowly, I opened it. It was another video. This time, the footage wasn't focused on me. It was pointed at my bedroom door. For a few seconds, nothing happened. The room was still, silent. Then, the door handle moved. It turned slowly, almost cautiously. My stomach twisted into knots as I watched. The handle stopped. And then, it started turning the other way, like someone had changed their mind. The video ended. I dropped my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely breathe. I had locked the door. I had checked it twice. But whoever was out there had still tried to come in. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I couldn't. I sat up in bed, phone clutched in my hand, staring at the door. Waiting. Listening. I never heard anyone leave. The next morning I moved out. I didn't bother packing everything. I grabbed my essentials, threw them into a bag, and left. I didn't care about the lease. I didn't care about losing my deposit. I just knew I wasn't staying there another night. The police didn't take me seriously. There was no sign of forced entry, no physical evidence. Just a couple of unsettling videos that, for all they knew, could have been faked. But I know the truth. Someone had been in my room. Someone had watched me sleep. And whoever they were, they wanted me to know. Back in the summer of 2001, I worked as a camp counselor at a sleepaway camp deep in the woods of Pennsylvania. It was the kind of camp where kids stayed for weeks, learning how to canoe, build campfires, and tell ghost stories. I worked there for 3 summers straight, and I had never experienced anything truly unsettling. Until that summer. Every Wednesday night, the counselors would organize a huge game of manhunt for the kids. If you've never played it, it's basically a nighttime version of hide and seek. One person is it, and they have to track down the others, who hide in the dark woods surrounding the camp. It was always fun, a highlight of the week, but the last game I ever played made me quit my job forever. That night after dinner, we gathered the campers and explained the rules. One of the counselors, let's call him Jake, volunteered to be the hunter. He covered his eyes and started counting to 30 while the rest of us ran into the woods. I sprinted in, my heart pounding with excitement. The woods were pitch black, the only light coming from the dim glow of the campfire back at the cabins. The air smelled like pine, and the trees stood tall and silent, their thick branches blocking out the sky. I found a perfect hiding spot behind a fallen log and crouched down, trying to control my breathing. I could hear twigs snapping in the distance. Probably other campers finding their own places to hide. A few feet away, I noticed two campers, Josh and Eric, running deeper into the woods. They were about 12 years old, best friends and always stuck together. I almost called out to them, telling them to stay close to camp, but I didn't, and that was my mistake. Time passed and I could hear Jake tagging kids one by one. Laughter and groans echoed through the trees as campers were found and sent back to the cabins. I waited, watching the shadows shift around me, listening. Then the buzzer sounded. 8:30 p.m. Game over. I stood up, stretched my legs, and started walking back toward the main area. The other campers and counselors were already there, gathering in the clearing. Jake grinned, victorious. Then someone asked, "Is everyone back?" We all looked around. I felt a creeping unease in my stomach. Josh and Eric were nowhere to be seen. At first, we thought they were just hiding, waiting to jump out and scare us. It wouldn't have been the first time. "Come on, guys, game's over," I shouted into the woods. Silence. The head counselor ordered all the kids to go back to their cabins while the staff spread out to look for them. I went back to where I had last seen them, calling their names. The trees loomed above me, their thick branches rustling slightly in the wind. I kept walking, the darkness pressing around me, still no sign of them. An hour passed, then two. By midnight, the police were called. The entire camp turned into a search party. Flashlights cut through the trees as officers and staff combed the area. We searched every trail, every hiding spot, even down by the lake. Nothing, not a single trace. Josh and Eric were gone. The police asked us questions. What had we seen? Had they said anything before the game? Did they mention wanting to run away? None of us had answers. They were just two normal kids, playing a game we had played dozens of times before, but they never came back. By the next morning, the camp was in full lockdown mode. The police brought in search dogs, but they lost the scent near the edge of the forest, where the trees gave way to a vast, empty field. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. The following week was a blur. Police officers came and went, reporters showed up at the camp gates, and parents pulled their kids out early. By the time summer ended, camp attendance had dropped so much that the owners decided to shut it down for good. I never went back. Years passed, and then last year, 2023, something happened that made my blood run cold. I got a friend request on Facebook. The name, Josh Reynolds. My heart skipped a beat. My fingers trembled as I clicked on the profile. There was no picture, no posts, no friends, just a single message sent directly to me. "We never stopped playing." My mouth went dry. My hands turned ice cold. It had to be a sick joke. Someone must have created the account to mess with me. But then I checked the profile creation date, July 2001. The same summer Josh and Eric disappeared. I stared at the screen, my pulse hammering. And then, another message. "Tag, you're it." That was 3 days ago. I haven't slept since. Every night I hear footsteps outside my window. Every night I feel like someone is watching me. I locked all my doors, I checked every window. But last night, when I woke up to get a glass of water, my front door was wide open. The game never ended. And now they're hunting me. In 2019, I moved to New York City for college. It had been my dream for years, living in the city, surrounded by the energy, the people, and the bright lights that never seemed to dim. I found a small, overpriced apartment on the third floor of an old brick building in Brooklyn. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. The first few months were normal. I'd go to my classes, study at coffee shops, and stay up late watching Netflix, wrapped in a blanket. The neighborhood was decent, quiet at night, with the occasional sound of a passing car or a dog barking in the distance. I never felt unsafe until the night I saw him, the man in the alley. It started on a Sunday night. I had spent the entire day studying for an exam, my brain exhausted from memorizing facts and formulas. Around 11 p.m., I decided to take a break and stretch my legs. My apartment window faced the back of another building, with a narrow alley in between. Normally, the alley was empty, just a few dumpsters and some trash bags. But that night, when I glanced out the window, I saw him. A tall man standing perfectly still in the shadows. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. At first, I thought maybe he was a homeless person looking for shelter. But there was something off about the way he stood there, unmoving, staring. Even though I couldn't see his face clearly, I knew. He was looking straight at my window. A chill ran down my spine. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he was just waiting for someone. Maybe he wasn't looking at me at all. Maybe I was just overreacting. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. After a minute, I closed the blinds. I told myself to ignore it, to go to bed. But I didn't sleep well that night. The next evening, just out of curiosity, I peeked out the window again, and my stomach dropped. He was still there, standing in the exact same spot. This time, I could see him more clearly. His clothes were dark, slightly tattered, but his posture was too stiff, too deliberate, like he was waiting for something. For me. I swallowed hard, my hands gripping the windowsill. I forced myself to look away. This was New York. Weird things happened all the time. Maybe he was just some guy who had nowhere else to go. But a deep instinctual fear clawed at my chest. I double-checked my door locks before going to bed. That night, something woke me up. A noise. A soft, almost imperceptible tapping sound. At first, I thought it was my imagination. But as my mind fully woke up, I realized it was coming from the window. My body went rigid. Tap, tap, tap. Slow, rhythmic, persistent. I turned my head, my heart pounding. Through the slats of my blinds, I could see a shadow, a human-shaped shadow. I wanted to scream. Instead, I slowly reached for my phone, my fingers trembling as I unlocked it. I turned on the camera and without moving the blinds, I took a photo. When I looked at the screen, my stomach lurched. A face, right outside my window, pale, expressionless, smiling. I dropped the phone. My breath came out in short, panicked gasps. I was on the third floor. There was no fire escape, no ledge wide enough for someone to stand on. And yet he was there, watching me, smiling. I leaped out of bed and ran to the door, my hands fumbling with the locks. I yanked it open and sprinted down the hallway, banging on my neighbor's door. When they finally answered, I practically fell into their apartment. I tried to explain through my ragged breaths, but all I could manage was, "There's someone at my window." They followed me back to my apartment, but when we opened the door, the window was closed, the blinds were down, and the alley below, empty. No sign of anyone, no footprints, nothing. My neighbor gave me a concerned look but shrugged it off. "Maybe you were dreaming," they suggested. I wanted to believe them, but I knew what I saw. And I knew he would be back. For the next few days, I refused to look out the window. I kept the blinds shut, the locks triple-checked. But no matter how hard I tried to ignore it, the feeling remained. That deep, gnawing sensation of being watched. Then one night, it happened again. 3:12 a.m. I woke up suddenly, my skin cold with sweat. Something felt wrong. I reached for my phone, using the dim glow of the screen to scan the room. And that's when I saw it. The closet door. It was slightly open. I knew for a fact I had closed it before going to bed. I held my breath, staring at the dark gap between the door and the frame. And then I heard breathing. Software ragged, coming from inside the closet. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. A shadow shifted within the darkness. And then, slowly, painfully slowly, the door began to open. I didn't wait. I bolted from my bed, grabbed my keys, and ran out of the apartment. I didn't stop running until I was outside in the street. I called the police, shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. By the time they arrived, the apartment was empty. No one in the closet, no sign of forced entry, but the window, unlocked. I moved out the next day. I didn't care about breaking my lease. I didn't care about losing my deposit. I just knew I couldn't stay there another night. The police never found anyone. The building manager swore the locks were fine, but I know the truth. That man in the alley, he wasn't just watching, he was waiting. And that night, he finally let himself in. Moving to a new place always comes with a bit of anxiety. New neighbors, unfamiliar surroundings, and the unsettling feeling that you don't fully belong yet. When I moved into my new apartment last fall, I was excited. It was a small but cozy place in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but it felt like a fresh start. The rent was cheap and everything seemed normal. But there was one thing I couldn't shake. For the first 2 weeks, I kept receiving mail for someone who didn't live there. The name on the letters was Lisa Reynolds. At first, I thought it was just a mistake. Maybe she had lived here before me and hadn't updated her address. It happens all the time, right? I wrote "Return to Sender" on the envelopes and dropped them back in the mailbox. But they kept coming. Every day. Letters, bills, even a few small packages. Each one addressed to Lisa Reynolds. I told my landlord about it, but he just shrugged. "Happens all the time. Just toss them," he said. So that's what I did. And that's when things got weird. One night I came home late from work. It had been a long day and all I wanted to do was collapse on the couch and forget about everything. I kicked off my shoes, tossed my bag on the floor, and headed to the kitchen for some water. That's when I saw it. A letter, sitting on my kitchen counter. Not in the mailbox, not by the door. On my counter. My entire body went cold. I hadn't brought it inside. I hadn't even checked the mail that day. And yet, there it was. A plain white envelope with my address on it. And the name Lisa Reynolds. I picked it up carefully, my fingers trembling. The paper felt slightly damp, like someone had been holding it for a long time. Slowly, I turned it over and opened it. There was only one sentence inside. "Why are you in my home?" I dropped the letter and staggered back, my heart hammering against my ribs. I checked the front door, still locked. The windows, shut tight. I grabbed my phone and called my landlord. "Hey, someone's been in my apartment," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. There was a pause. Then he sighed. "Listen," he said, "I wasn't going to tell you this because I didn't want to scare you. But the last tenant, Lisa Reynolds, she went missing." My breath caught my throat. "What?" I whispered. "Yeah, about a year ago," he continued. "She just vanished. Left everything behind. Clothes, furniture, even her damn toothbrush. The cops looked into it, but there was no sign of her. Just gone." I swallowed hard. "So why do I keep getting her mail?" Another pause, then, in a lower voice, he said, "Because nobody ever found her body." I didn't sleep that night. I double-checked the locks, closed all the blinds, and sat on the couch with every light on. My eyes flicked to the letter on the floor, that single haunting sentence looping in my head. "Why are you in my home?" The next morning, I told myself I was being ridiculous. Maybe someone was messing with me. Maybe it was just some leftover weirdness from Lisa's disappearance. I decided to put cameras inside the apartment, just in case. If someone was breaking in, I'd catch them. For a few days, nothing happened. No strange letters, no signs of anyone entering. I started to relax, convincing myself that it was all just a weird coincidence. Then 3 nights later, my phone buzzed at 2:48 a.m. Motion detected. My stomach dropped. The app connected to my cameras. I tapped it open, my hands shaking as I brought up the footage. At first, everything looked normal. The living room was empty. The kitchen was still. Then in the corner of the screen, the closet door creaked open. Slowly, painfully slow, like someone was stepping out. But I hadn't seen anyone go in. I stared at the screen, my breath caught in my throat. Then, movement. A figure stepped into the room. My blood turned to ice. It was a woman, barefoot. Her hair hung in damp, tangled strands over her face. Her clothes were stained, torn like she had been wearing them for months. And her skin, pale, almost gray. She stood in the center of my living room, her head tilting slightly, like she was listening for something. Then slowly, she turned and looked directly at the camera, at me. I slapped my hand over my mouth to keep from screaming, because even though I had never met her before, I knew who she was, Lisa Reynolds. I didn't stay to find out what happened next. I grabbed my keys, ran out the door, and didn't look back. By the time the police arrived, the apartment was empty. No sign of forced entry, no woman, no footprints. But the closet door was open, and on the kitchen counter they found another letter. This time, it had my name on it. I never left. I moved out that same day. I don't know what happened to Lisa Reynolds. I don't know if she's alive, if she ever was to begin with. But sometimes late at night I wonder, if she never left, who else is still there?